Scott Lauer.
Where are you right now?
So I'm in Tempe. I got a Arizona State and Kansas State tonight. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to know why it's annoying to hear me on calling your favorite team, whether it's on an ESPN game or on an ESPN Plus game, you have Scott to thank, because it's all his fault. He helped me get involved in all this, got the wheels moving, made me believe in myself, and now here we are.
I'll tell you, I mean, I say this every time I'm on one of your shows, but I follow every platform that you are on, and I love it. No, really, man, I'm so proud of what you've done. It's been awesome.
So I think about you now. I've been making, so I usually, a lot of times I use some of those, and this is for play-by-play folks. We'll get to the Luka thing in a second, but this is top of mind. I will get the chart services, right? Like Tony Britt's, like spotter sheets a lot of times for basketball games. But some of the best games I ever do, Scott, are the ones where I take the manila folder. I just do exactly what you used to do, right? And it's almost like less is more. Like you're not like tied down by all these like wild notes and facts, and you really let the game just kind of come to you and breathe. And that's what you used to do, right?
Yeah. You know, there was a time, actually, Steve Martin, you know, the longtime voice of the Hornets, he introduced me to this service. You know, I forgot the name of it at the time. This was back like 12, 13 years ago. And I tried it one night and I printed everything out, and it came with all these in-depth stats. And I was so overwhelmed, and it was just out of my element because I was not familiar with it at all. And I talked to him the next day before the next game, and I said, I was just horrible during this broadcast trying your system. I'm going back to the archaic, you know, multicolored pen, manila folder, because that's just what works for me. And I also like writing my own information down, because that was another way for me to remember.
Dude, that is part of the process for me that helps so much. And the multicolored pen, you taught me that. I read, I consume all these books, right? These play-by-play guy books. I remember when I was living with you in Charlotte, I read the Al Michaels book, which I just, again, listened to on audio. But Joe Buck talks about that multicolored pen being like his go-to, like the golden staff and rod, you know?
So I have something in common with Joe Buck. That's good.
Yeah, not just the pipes.
All
right. What about?
You bought me that book, which I love, the Joe Buck book about 50 years ago.
Yeah, it's a tremendous book. It makes him way more likable when you read that.
Yep. Talking about his securities with his hair and all that stuff.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So what do we got on this trade? It's Saturday. Did you find out about it Saturday night or Sunday morning?
You know, this is a little surreal too. So one of my good buddies is Kevin Connors. He's an ESPN Sports Center anchor. And I was struggling to fall asleep Saturday night. And I leave my TV on to ESPN generally as I go to sleep. And so I'm in a daze and a fog, and I hear Kev in the background. And I wasn't sure if it was a dream or what. But he's like, breaking news, Luka Doncic traded for Anthony. And I'm thinking to myself, this can't be. Is this really happening? And, you know, I'm half asleep. But that's how wild it was for me. I just couldn't believe it. And then I'm listening even more and more. And, of course, there's the shock factor involved. Nobody knew this was coming. So my whole thing on this is the Lakers clearly won the deal. I mean, you get a guy who's top 3, top 4 in the league, and he's not even in his prime. But the thing that still resonates with me, and I was listening to you guys before I came on, and I've heard this perspective. It's, you know, Dallas is trying to paint it like he's the guy that we can't trust with his future and his conditioning and all that. And maybe they don't want another Joel Embiid situation where they're paying a guy exorbitant amounts of money that's only playing half the time, things like that. But at the end of the day, his production has been unreal. He's been to the finals. He's been to the Western Conference Finals another year, all by the age of 24 at the time. But the thing that I can't get over, even if you think all of these things, you have to auction him. You've got to tell every team in the NBA, Luka Doncic can be had. What are you going to give us? You can't go to one team and basically negotiate against the one. You've got to have a bidding war created. It's like selling a house. You put it on the market to have open competition. You don't just go to one buyer and say, what's your offer? Great, we've got a deal. That to me is something that Nico can definitely not justify ever. Because deep down, if he had canvassed the league, even though he targeted Anthony Davis, obviously, he still could have gotten more from LA. There's no question about that.
Do you feel at all like, where does ownership come down on this? I know you and I really favor Mark Cuban. I remember he was a guy who, I remember Scott tried to pitch a dating site to Mark Cuban back in the day. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he gets right back to you. Like great, like he's just a very, I don't know. Everybody, I liked my interactions with Cuban. I know you did too. He's now out of the fold. If he's still the owner of the Mavs, does this trade happen?
I don't think so. I mean, and of course, we don't know the inner workings and the new ownership group shun this, or if Nico convinced them he's not worth the gamble and all that. But I just, to me, Doncic was part of the Cuban era legacy, stealing the sky and going deep early in his career. I just can't see this happening with Cuban on board. But I think it also speaks to the fact that Cuban really doesn't have any kind of a voice now, which I think maybe he thought he would as he sold to this group.
How about the players in this? Like, LeBron didn't know. Jason Kidd didn't know. Obviously, Luka did not know. And I think that, do you believe, like, if it became that auction style that you and I believe would have gotten the Mavericks the most out of the deal, but does that shut the deal down? Like, the more people get involved, the more it slows it down, and Luka says, I don't want to be traded. No.
I don't think so at all. I mean,
Okay.
I think that's a defensive approach, and maybe Dallas will spin it that way down the road. But no, I think you've got to put it out there, because according to what I've heard, literally no other GM even knew Doncic was realistically available, and Doncic didn't have the ability to say no. Only LeBron James and Bradley Beal have no trade clauses, so he doesn't have any leverage. I mean, it may have been awkward, and sure, there's the shock factor that we all would have had when they put it out there. But that's the only way to get true value. I mean, look, Mikal Bridges got 5 first-round picks, basically, right? I mean, and again, we know Davis is a great player, and he's going to be marvelous for 3 or 4 years, but he's 5.5 years older than Doncic. I think they could have gotten Austin Reeves instead of like a Max Christie, even though I like Christie as well, or maybe at least a couple of extra first-round picks. But again, we'll never know. That's the hypothetical mess, because they didn't have this bidding war in the auction. So they have no idea truly what the value was. But when we're talking with a top 3 guy, I mean, behind Jokic, I can make a case he's number 2 based on his age and his production. Maybe, of course, Giannis is in there and things like that. But that's what you get. In 5 years, Davis is in the deep dotage of his career, and Doncic could still be in his late prime. No, it makes no sense, the value that they got.
Would David Stern have stopped this trade?
I don't think so. I don't think it was that unfairly balanced per se, only because you're getting a great player in his prime in Davis. So I wouldn't go that far. Like it was like one of those old Chris Paul trades. No.
Do you have any like experience or like what do you know about Nico Harrison?
I don't know much about him.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard of his history with, I guess, Rob Pelinka, and going back to like the Kobe Bryant ties and the whole agency deal.
So he was Kobe's Nike rep when Kobe was with obviously with the Lakers, and Pelinka was his agent. So there's like a tie-in there, right? Which is also sort of worrisome. Like, it's and we've seen this before. It's like 2 buddies making a deal. I just can't believe something of this magnitude happens in a silo like that. It's so hard to understand. Are there any deals that you can remember in your history following the NBA that have mirrored this, or you can compare to this?
No, I mean, with the Lakers, like when Pau Gasol was acquired from Memphis, right? And Marc Gasol, funny enough, was kind of like what we thought at the time was maybe a little throw-in, and he turned out to be actually a really good piece long term. But at the time, we were thinking, I mean, who was that, like Javaris Crittenden in that deal? And like, just like, speaking of former Charlotte players, like it seemed to be a completely lopsided deal at the time. And of course, Gasol helped them, win a championship. But no, and again, I think we all can acknowledge it's not because they didn't get back a great haul, but I think they could have gotten back more, and they didn't give themselves a chance to really see the value in it. To me, that is absolutely inexcusable for a GM. You have to get it out there.
What's the future like for Luka in LA? In your opinion, based on your experience, again, following the league, tracking the league, working in it, and then, LeBron's 40 years old. Who knows how much time he's got left, and he's going to have to. I don't know if he's going to have to. That's probably a bad way of putting it, but it's probably Luka's team now. When you think about the future, how do things take shape there?
I mean, I think we got a little bit of a precursor with LeBron sort of acquiescing to Anthony Davis in the last couple of years, or trying to promote his prowess and trying to defer to him a little bit and say, no, this is AD's team. So I think maybe he can, easily push aside any ego that maybe we would have questioned with LeBron years ago. But I'm actually fascinated by the two playing in harmony right now. I mean, like you've got like a pick and roll with Doncic and James, and like sliding it over to the other guy on short rolls, and then because they're both exquisite passers. I mean, I think, the interesting thing to me is like Dallas, people are saying Dallas is going to be better now. Why are they going to be better now with Davis than Doncic? I never even understood that take from a lot of people, of media members. But I think they need a big, LA, of course. But once they get a big, probably in the next couple of days before the deadline, I mean, who wants to play them? James, Doncic, Reeves is a fantastic third option, and he can create as well. So they've got, great creators all around the court now.
So back to the Mavs. So people are excited that Anthony Davis won't have to play the 5 as much, and that's where he was extremely effective playing for the Pelicans. Do you feel like that is something that will be really important for the Mavs to have? Like, are we not? I guess like will Anthony Davis play out of his mind now because he's playing the 4, kind of to push back a little bit on what you were just saying? Like, is that why people are so excited about Dallas?
I mean, it's an intriguing roster with all like their athleticism up front and the length. I mean, I don't know if it's added incentive for AD, but seemingly he's been complaining most of his career. I think even in New Orleans, I remember him years ago saying, hey, I want to be the 4. I don't want to be the 5, for whatever that's worth. But I guess he'll be more of in his comfort zone now. I mean, I think Doncic is the one that probably has more to play for with, the criticism about his conditioning and maybe his high maintenance ways. Davis, it seemed like, jumped at the chance to go to Dallas without much pushback from what I heard, which is interesting. I think Dallas is a really strong team, but I'm not convinced they're any better now than they were 3 days ago, having Davis versus Doncic. But look, I can appreciate length and defense, and they've definitely improved that. And I think Max Christie, for what it's worth, is a quality young player as well. But again, I just harken back to the value, and I don't think they maximized it.
Are we putting too much emphasis? And this is, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, it was so much better before we had cell phones and, before we could stream everything and get on social media, or in the basketball sense, before analytics, right? But is this a tipping point for analytics and all the bells and whistles now that come with an NBA organization? You're paying somebody to cook their food. You're paying somebody to put them on a scale every morning. Everybody's got to sort of justify an existence and a job. And, so this basketball operations staff and fitness staff that has to keep Luka in tip-top shape, that is completely just getting blown off time and time again by him. Like, I feel like that had something to do with this, right? Like, in our NBA growing up as kids, this never would have been an issue. Like, could you imagine if I mentioned this? What if the Sixers had traded Charles Barkley in like 1984? Because the guy just won't get in shape. He's been here for a year. Like, screw him. He's out of here. Like, no, that never would have happened back then because nobody gave a shit. Just get out there and play, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that has contributed to a deal like this going down?
I'm not sure externally, even though, things get out there now. And so maybe it's a little more embarrassing for an organization.
But I mean, I even mean internally, Scott. Like, like the strength and conditioning guy going to Nico Harrison, like he didn't show up again today for a while.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. But at the same time, you've got to parse what is important. And you've got to weigh, okay, Luka may be high maintenance. I don't want to put words in their mouth. Or maybe he's not in the best of shape, or he's 20 pounds heavier than they would like. But you've got to weigh the productivity. I mean, that's also the interesting thing for me. Let's just say he is out of shape and he is high maintenance. They just went to the finals. And they went to the Western Conference Finals not far behind that. So I would take my chances on that with a guy that's still 25 years old versus maybe letting your pride and ego get in the way if you're management. But yeah, I think you have a fair point that there's more for them to digest.
I think so. I feel like there's so many, although this was a decision and deal, like it's like almost like a boutique operation, just like 3 or 4 people involved, or maybe just 2. But there's so many cooks in the kitchen now on the basketball side. And, are you doing this? Are you doing that? I feel like there could be a little bit of, having bubbled up there, maybe contributing more to this deal being.
I mean, imagine if Doncic was on Pat Riley's Miami squad. I mean, when LeBron was with Riley, there were whispers that Riley was shutting him down for having his personal entourage on the private charters and things like that. And LeBron was used to having everybody in Cleveland cater to his every whim. And Riley was like, hell with that. Not here.
That's a question I wanted to ask you last week, but I couldn't wrangle you and clearly now you're the picture of health, but you were sick last week. Really, you look great. Pat Riley, is that gone now? The Pat Riley, iron fist approach. It's a players' league, and I feel like the Jimmy Butler situation last week, sort of. I heard Kendrick Perkins say that. Really, that Larry, that Pat Riley needs to just understand that it's not 1996 anymore, and that things have changed. Where do you come down on that?
I think people have to be who they are. I mean, Nico Harrison, had a shade of Pat Riley, and he obviously thought that enough was enough in his own world. If you think it's what's best for the team moving forward and variables are not worth it, then move on. I mean, I respect that from Riley. I think that's refreshing, frankly. I mean, is Butler winning in this? I don't know. I mean, he's losing a lot of money. He's losing some, I think, of his reputation that maybe he had restored. But I think this is the old Butler coming out because everywhere he goes, it ends this way. Everywhere.
Yeah. And now he's too old where I don't even think it matters. I don't know. I heard Frank Iasola say yesterday that, he was like, speaking as if he were GM, like I wouldn't bother with him anymore because he's too old now for all this.
No, I mean, he's solid. He's a 17.5 rebound, 5 assist guy. That's a headache. And so why do you want to pay this guy $50 million? So I personally applaud Riley. And I'm old school as a New Yorker. And But no, I think he's putting a guy in his place. And you can't question Riley's approach and his success level for all these years. But, and quickly going back to the Doncic thing, it's interesting when you look at some of the best players in the league. I think sometimes people can overlook bodies, right? Like, okay, Doncic is a big guy. Jalen Brunson is, bigger bone per se, right? He doesn't look like a track star. Kevin Durant is still a toothpick, right? 17 years later in the league. You don't have to look the part to be a great player. So again, Dallas knows more about Doncic than anybody. So that's an interesting flag in itself, but the production you can never have any qualms with, and the fact that they didn't canvass the league was a grave mistake for value.
Lauer, you got to do this with me at least every 2 weeks now that we're in the thick of it. We're basketball season. Come on.
This is great. This is great.
Yeah.
You know, I'm on board with anything you want. You know that.
I'm going to send you something. I mean, we can talk about this offline, but there's a great interview that Dan Lebatard did with Pat Riley. It's like an hour and 15 minutes. You got to hear it. It's amazing. It was just recent.
How do you have time for all this? You know,
you're a
big media mogul, and now you're listening to other podcasts.
I go on. I used to go on runs, as you know, all the time, and now I'm like you. I walk everywhere, so I'm doing more walking, and that's when you have time to listen to stuff.
So your joints are getting the best of you too.
I mean, it's just not. I don't have it like I used to, man. I mean, hey, father time, baby.
Are you 48 now?
Tomorrow.
Happy birthday. Tomorrow.
Christy threw like a birthday party for me over the weekend, and she got a cake and it said 48 on it. I was like, yo. Let's just can we get the number off the cake? You know.
I love it. All right. We're going to talk more about Christy later.
All right, we will. And you are the best. Scott Lauer, a good friend, NBA experience. He is a Hall of Famer in the Pete Souza show. That's for sure. All right, Scotty. We'll talk soon, man.